A Taliban attack in Afghanistan killed dozens of security personnel on Monday. At the same time, members of the armed group are holding talks with U.S. diplomats in Qatar. So, is the Taliban using a strategy of attacks and talks? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rochelle Carey. Afghanistan has been at war for much of the past 40 years. In late 2001, the United States sent troops in response to the 9/11 attacks, and the withdrawal of those troops has been one of the sticking points as talks get underway in Qatar between U.S. and Taliban representatives. But hours before those talks began in Doha, Taliban fighters launched one of their most daring attacks in recent months. A gun and bomb raid on an Afghan intelligence and military base southwest of Kabul. It killed dozens of security personnel. Many are now looking to see if the timing of the attack, coming on the eve of those talks, could have an impact on negotiations. There have been several efforts to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table, but the armed group has repeatedly refused to hold direct talks with the Afghan government. Instead, it's insisted on negotiating with the U.S. with the primary goal of forcing foreign troops out of the country. At the request of the U.S., the Taliban opened an office in Doha in 2013 to facilitate talks. The U.S. shifted its policy last year and said it was ready to hold direct talks with the Taliban and discuss the role of international forces. A round of talks took place in the UAE last month before officially resuming in Qatar this week. Let's bring in our guests now in Kabul. Omar Zakiwal, he is a former president's special representative to Ashraf Ghani and Afghan ambassador to Pakistan in Islamabad. Imtiaz Gul headed the Center for Research and Security Studies. And in Washington, David Sedney, former Deputy U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it very much. Omar, I'm going to start with you. The timing of this attack, what message do you think the Taliban is trying to send?
It's not a very good message because talks need an environment that is more conducive, and violence reduction would be the right response. But unfortunately, the attack yesterday was to the contrary. But at the same time, it's important that this does not derail the ongoing talks and that we focus moving forward with this.
Okay, same question to you, Imtiaz. What message do you think the Taliban was trying to send doing this and at the time that they did it?
I think being a party to the conflict, being one of the stakeholders, they just wanted to underline their own strength on ground. They just sent a message to all and sundry that whatever the Kabul government may think of them, they can still penetrate as far as even the intelligence and security facilities of the government. And this is basically to underscore their strength on ground right now.
And David, Imtiaz brings up a good point, not just this attack, but specifically the target, just all of that together. What type of message do you think they're trying to send?
Well, I think it is actually quite common when talks are underway for those involved in a conflict to try to gain advantage. In particular, the weaker side tries to mount attacks in order to maximize its strength. And in this case, the Taliban are clearly the weaker side, and this attack sends is that the real target of the Taliban is the Afghan government and Afghan security forces. While the Taliban rhetoric has been that this is about foreign troops and U.S. presence, in fact, those who have been killed by the Taliban are overwhelmingly Afghan. And over the last 4 years, since the U.S. Basically drew down most of its troops in Afghanistan, the Taliban have increasingly been targeting Afghan security forces. So this is actually a two-pronged message by the Taliban. First, they want to get stronger in case talks go forward. But second, they're sending a message to Afghans that you are the target and we're going after Afghans.
So what has been seen as one of the sticking points, one of two major sticking points, is which would be the release of Taliban prisoners and